Okay. Thanks. All right. To set our motivation, just take a few moments to find back to great compassion, to the altruistic resolve, as well as bodhicitta, most importantly. By just reflecting on a few things. First of all, we come from a very individualistic society. If you come from Western society, I mean, if you were raised in Asia, maybe not. But Tibetans, in comparison, are not as individualistic as we are. I mean, it's changing, but traditionally, at least my classmates, for instance, they weren't at all. The nuns that I know, they're not. And so one thing that makes it hard, I mean, just the fact that we are coming from such a background, what is difficult is to feel that closeness towards others. It's just hard. That's not to say we don't have a lot of advantages. For instance, our education. We have developed, through the modern education, a logical tool that helps us to understand some of the ideas like emptiness better, impermanence. But Buddhism can only be effectively practiced if you have the two aspects of method and wisdom together. So method here is this emotional side of closeness towards sentient beings, love, compassion towards sentient beings. The good thing is we know about neuroplasticity. So we know our brain can change. However old we are. In the past we used to think, oh, we're too old to make changes. But now we know, well, it doesn't matter how old you are, your brain still changes. But today is the youngest day, the youngest we will be, well, from now on. This is the youngest day. So might as well start now. The older we get, the harder it'll be to change our mind, which is totally possible. I mean, our mind, which means our brain, together with our mind. We can make these changes. But one thing that may be an indication that we are still individualistic is that we have competitiveness in a way in which Tibetans don't. Tibetans, my classmates, for instance, they were very good at rejoicing in the success of the other. That's not to say that on the debate ground sometimes there wasn't kind of a rivalry or something, but it was just on the debate ground. And in general, well, we have that a little bit in the West when the football team of your country plays and you win. And it's like, we won! So we're not jealous of don't feel competitive towards the football players that they won and we didn't, because it feels like, oh, they're part of us, we're part of them, so our country won. And in that case, there's not really that competitiveness in sports. But no, in general, that we're competitive with each other, even in the Dharma. So that's something to watch out for. Not everyone's got it, but every now and then, it's there. And instead, if we notice that in ourselves, to think, gotcha. I caught you. I caught that mind that feels separate from everyone else. Because actually, if someone is good in the Dharma, in terms of their studies, their reflection, and their meditation, well, great, the more the better. I need help, right? Anyone who's aiming towards becoming a Buddha, don't forget me when you get there. Right? So that kind of attitude, because what is the whole goal? For the benefit of all sentient beings. So every single person who's working towards that, who's practicing we should be so happy for them, right? But that's just something we may have more than, for instance, Tibetans. Tibetans are really good at rejoicing. I mean, they're not competitive. Really, I don't think, I mean, maybe every now and then there was like when I thought, oh, maybe, I'm not sure. But no, usually not. They're really laid back, they do their best. Often, I mean, sometimes maybe they're too laid back, but usually they work hard, and it's very much for the community. We are Tibetans, we are monks, we are nuns, we belong to this institution. I mean, in these monasteries, they work their butts off for the monastery, without any reward, just because it's the right thing to do. And they do their very best to practice the Dharma, and it's admirable. They're very resilient. Oftentimes, people misinterpret their behavior. It seems really rough. I remember someone saying they're not sure whether in the monasteries, like they were talking about, I think Sarah J, whether the driving force that made the decision was based on compassion or on wisdom. So they thought it wasn't compassion. But I think we misunderstand compassion. Compassion is not like, oh, your ego is so precious, just do whatever you want. Compassion can be really tough. Can be really tough. I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I remember one teaching a few years ago, he's kicked someone out during the teachings. He said to this monk, he was teaching and we were listening, and suddenly he went like, you, get up. We were like, me? I was like, who's he talking to? And he basically asked a monk to leave. That was scary. When I have some time, I'll tell you why. There's actually a whole story behind it. It was fascinating. But for now, it was for the benefit of that person, actually. But we only found out later. So the point is, in the monasteries, they make tough decisions sometimes. Why? Because compassion, being directed towards the benefit of others, it usually means long-term benefit versus short-term benefit, and to benefit as many people as possible. It's not about fulfilling the wishes of one person at the expense of everyone else's. It doesn't work, especially in a community like a monastery or a nunnery. Secondly, yeah, we want short-term gratification, usually. Oh, I don't want to go to exercise because I'm so comfortable on my couch, right? Sounds familiar? So long-term, it's like short-term benefit. We often choose that over long-term benefit. I mean, our whole lives are about that, basically. Oh, a little bit more samsara. Liberation tomorrow. And I'm including myself. I mean, I'm just saying it because I know from my own experience. So therefore, it seems rough, but it's really guided by compassion. The decision makers, they're usually not ordinary monks. They're appointed for a particular reason because they're really good in what they're doing. The same goes for the nunnery. So they're good at what they're doing, they're sincere in their practice, and so forth. Anyway, so having said that, we can become like that. No reason why not. The only thing that's in the way is our own mind. But let's face it, we've tried so hard to find happiness since beginning this time. Okay, let's assume there is, for some of us, it may be difficult, like reincarnation. But okay, so if there's reincarnation, I mean, we've been trying everything. Who knows, some of you may, or one of you may have been Albert Einstein, a reincarnation of Albert Einstein. So what? You don't remember, and no one else does. Or the reincarnation of Napoleon. Wow, you had a whole empire at your feet. So what? All gone. You may have been a rich, super rich pharaoh. Done. Gone. Right? So therefore, since beginning this time, we've been trying to find happiness for ourselves. We couldn't even, for just one person. And we couldn't even give it to that one person. The one individual we cared for so much until now. Still not satisfied. still have problems, still look for happiness in the most impossible places. Search for lasting happiness in samsara. That's like trying to get olive oil out of a grain of sand. Right? Or running through a wall. So the only way is to direct our focus towards sentient beings. And the good thing is that benefits us much more than anyone else. That shouldn't be our main reason for doing so, but that's just the way it is. If we really focus on others, the benefit of all sentient beings, without neglecting ourselves. In fact, we look after ourselves to be of more benefit to others. We need to be well fed, we need to be well rested, we need to be healthy. Just as a mother, for instance, a mother who's, I don't know, got 15 children, she has to look after herself to be able to keep working for her family. In a similar way, we need to, of course, look after ourselves with the motivation for the benefit of all sentient beings. So therefore, it's so important that we change this focus. If we really want to look after ourselves well, find that happiness we've been searching for since beginning this time, now's the time to make that change, to just switch it around. And I remember Geshe Thupten Pesang, he once said, if this obsession with the I doesn't stop, think of others as I. Right? We think like I need, I don't want. We're so used to it. Our brain is used to it. Our mind is used to it. Just think, this is other and this is I. Right? I mean, it sounds a little absurd, but first I was like, how is that going to work? But then I thought about it a little bit and I thought, yeah, it's just a matter of becoming familiar with it. I mean, this body was not always my body. In a last life, well, who knows? Maybe I was a dog in a monastery. You know, I've got some imprints, so I may have been like one of those little dogs. So I was so attached to my little furry, I'm thinking of like a white dog. I don't know, maybe black dog, whatever. This dog, you know, that was my body. I protected it, I licked it, I don't know, scratched it, I fed it. And then my mind left that dog's body. It was reborn into, well, the fertilized egg of a human being. And over time, I kept thinking, me, this is I, this is my body, oh, my body over everyone else's. I had to get used to it. Wasn't there right from the beginning? And there's scientific experiences that prove how this can be changed. Venerable Kumbin probably remembers, I talked about it before, but there's this experiment where a person wears these virtual reality goggles, I think they're called, right? And so they're in a room where there is a dummy, like a dummy, like a doll kind of, you know, you have like these dummies, what is it called, like mannequin in a shop, for instance. So it's on the other side of the room. But when this person looks down on themselves, because there was a camera installed at the head of this mannequin, they look down on themselves, the body they see is the body of the mannequin. They don't see their own body. Right? So they wear these goggles for a while, they keep looking down, and before long, since our mind is so used to associating whatever is down there when you look down, to associate that with your own body, before long, it actually identifies with that body. And the experiment continues by touching the body, right? First, you touch the actual body and at the same time touch the mannequin. But then at some point, when you stop touching the body of the person wearing the goggles, that they can feel it. And then they do this really mean thing. Take a knife and put the knife into the mannequin's belly. And the person with the goggles says, "Ugh!" Nothing happened to them. Nothing. But they experience some kind of pain. They experience some sensation because they associate this body. So it's like, how connected is it really to me? Right? Of course, the nerves, etc. But in the end, it's sensations that our mind does experience, but then we interpret it as pain and so forth. There's a purpose for that in terms of biology, and it's all necessary. My point, the only point I'm trying to make is we got used to thinking of my body as mine. We got used to thinking, this is I, this is the center of the universe. And in the same way, it can be undone. We can undo it if we just keep doing it. When we were little, we weren't used to brushing our teeth, right? In fact, I hated it. I pretended I did. I scrapped the toothbrush on the sink, so my parents thought I was. I ended up going to the dentist all the time, but I hated it. Silly. But the point is, I got used to it now. Now I couldn't think of not brushing my teeth every day. That's disgusting. But I wasn't used to it in the beginning. I made a habit of it. So in the same way, we can make the habit of, instead of thinking me, 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 thinking of others. So let's try. We've been trying already. Let's try harder. Right? We're the youngest we will ever get, so our brain is the freshest. Up till the day we die, well, let's make an extra effort. Okay. By remembering, we have so much in common. Of course, we all want to be happy and don't want to suffer. But something else. We're all living beings. As part of our identity, there are different parts of our identity. Male, female, rich, poor, French, American, whatever. All those we can easily give up if it comes down to giving up that or giving up our being a living being. Because giving up being a living being means dying, and that's the last thing we give up, right? If our life is at stake, we give up our money, our possessions, our reputation, just to stay alive. So we are living beings. We all have that. We have that in common. We all have that in common. We all have a mind. So if usually we relate to people because we have something in common with them, because they have the same taste in music or the same taste in clothes, or they come from the same country or have the same religion, that's so superficial. We're all living beings. We have something in common that goes so much deeper. Right? So how could my happiness, especially since my life depends on other living beings, could my happiness in any way be more important? All right. So based on that, let's do a short meditation before we recite the prayers. We start as always with just watching our breath. And then let's remember that although we've been obsessed with ourselves and our own happiness since beginning this time, we haven't even been able to fulfill our wish to find lasting happiness. We're unable to truly benefit even one individual. So obviously, it's not working. And the alternative is to focus on the benefit for the sentient beings. Including ourselves, of course. But at first, focusing on others first. Remembering the living beings just as we are. And our well-being is dependent on this. And so let's generate the aspiration to bring them lasting happiness. Lasting satisfaction. To remove what prevents them from achieving such satisfaction. So what is that? State of lasting satisfaction? Well, it's liberation, or even better, full enlightenment. So let's generate the sincere resolve to do all we can to lead other sentient beings to liberation or enlightenment. And since we're only able to do so if we first attain the enlightened state of a Buddha ourselves, let's therefore generate mudita that aspires to attain the same state as Buddha Shakyamuni and endless others for the benefit of every sentient being. So with that in mind, or without letting go of our motivation, let's recite the prayers. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. Okay, great. Now, before we go back to the text, what I really enjoy is the discussion group. In the sense that there are again and again questions or remarks that I think everyone would find helpful. What I want to say a little bit about it, especially Maud's question from last time, I want to address that. But before I do that, I want to say something about Lei Peng's question about mind and mental factors. It's a little bit off topic, but I think it's misunderstood. It's misunderstood. Does anyone feel they totally understood what mind and mental factors refers to here? Anyone? Like, did I feel comfortable? I got it. No. If you do, please raise your hand. Absolutely. I'm not asking you to explain it, so no worries. Okay. I want to say something about that because it's really the basis. The thing is with mind and mental factors, what could be a little bit misleading is the language that's used and the analogies that are used. But this is not blaming the language or the analogies, because they're great. So initially it can lead to a misunderstanding, but it's absolutely necessary to use that kind of language. What is the language that is used? We say a main mind that is accompanied by mental factors, or a main mind that is concomitant with mental factor. A main mind that's associated with mental factors. Those are some of the translations used to translate the Tibetan term, Tsungpa. And it sounds as if they were totally separate. If I'm associated with an institution, well, it's not like I'm part of, I'm that institution, that we're like one entity. We're like part and parcel. No, it's separate from me. Similarly, the analogy that is used is like a main mind is like the palm of the hand, and the mental factors are like the 5 fingers. Again, they are different substantial entities, right? It's not like saying the 5 hands, the 5 fingers and my hand, which are part and parcel, which are one substantial entity. No, no, no. The analogy is main mind is the palm and each finger is the mental factor. Other analogies are a candle and the rays of the candle. The candle is the main mind, the rays of the candle are the mental factors. Those are actually cause and effect. The candle itself gives rise to the rays of the candle. Again, it doesn't work. There are different entities. Okay, so which is why I thought I'd say a little bit about it. Okay, so again, it's a little off topic, but I thought this may be a good time to clarify it. But first of all, in Buddhist psychology, as most of you know, you have 6 types of consciousness. They're like streams of awareness. And each one of them operates as a separate kind of stream. Therefore, while you're listening to my voice, for instance, you can reflect on the meaning of my words and at the same time be aware of the temperature in this room and the color of the table in front of you. Right? You can pretty much do that. It's not exactly simultaneous, but it happens pretty much at the same time. Okay. But within of each of these streams, so eye consciousness, ear consciousness, right, like streams of awareness, we distinguish between main mind and mental factors. Okay? Each stream of consciousness has its own main mind and mental factors. But what is so important is that they're not separate entities, but they're rather different functional aspects of a single consciousness. Different functions, different aspects of one particular stream of consciousness. So the 6 types of consciousness, they're distinct from each other. But within each, whether eye consciousness or ear consciousness, the main mind and its accompanying mental factors are one unified entity. They're inseparably linked. So let's take, for instance, an eye consciousness perceiving visual form. So from the perspective of simply perceiving its object, it is a main mind. From the perspective of perceiving its object, we call it a main mind. From the perspective of that same mind, discerning the object's color and shape, or distinguishing it from other visual objects, it functions as the mental factor of discernment. So it's just from the perspective of simply perceiving its object, we call it main mind. That same mind, from the perspective of being able to discern, to distinguish between the different aspects of the same object or distinguishing it from other objects, we call it discernment. Right? Okay, so as an example. But this doesn't mean that these are separate consciousnesses, they're just different functional perspective on the same moment of awareness. To illustrate this, let's take an example. A Tibetan nun called Drokha. Okay, she's Tibetan, she's a Buddhist nun who lives in India. Her core identity as a living being, she is a living being. That's her core identity, her kind of main function, I guess, to stay alive, basically. Right? That's pretty much the most basic, and she does that automatically, so it's not a big deal, but that's her main function, being a living being. So that corresponds to the main mind. But thinking of her from the perspective of being a human being, a Tibetan, a nun, a woman, a daughter, a Tibetan refugee, we highlight different roles or aspects. That's just like the mental factors. So Drokha as a living being is like a main mind. Then Drokha as a Tibetan, Drokha as a woman or a nun, these are like mental factors. But it's the same person, we're talking about the same person, we're simply focusing on different aspects of her identity or her activities, right? In the case of this person. Similarly, main minds and mental factors are really just referring to the same consciousness viewed through different functional lenses, right? So there are at least, or I come to that in a sec, well, yeah, there are at least 5 main functions, plus the, well, 5 functions. No, I should say, there's always one main function, which is, there's always a main mind, and there are always 5 secondary functions. Always 5 secondary, but essential functions. The main function is just the most basic function of a mind, of a main mind. So perceiving its object, apprehending its object. That's the most basic function every mind has. From that perspective, we describe that consciousness, that mind, as main mind. And then it also has at least 5 secondary but essential functions, such as discerning its object, engaging its object, experiencing a pleasant sensation or an unpleasant sensation at the same time as experiencing its object, and so forth. And then if you add to certain functions, the function of anger, if I get angry now, then my, in this case, mental consciousness, anger is always a mental consciousness, on top of the 5 secondary function and the main function of apprehending its object, there's also the function or the activity of my anger, right? So Therefore, there's the mental factor of anger, because now my mind, from the perspective of functioning with anger or acting or being angry, in other words, I describe, from that perspective of the mind, I describe that as anger. Why make it so difficult? Why not say it's just got these different functions? Well, it's helpful to kind of, through the language, describe it as separate to understand it better. The mind is so complicated, it's so intricate. It can perform so many functions at each moment in time. At the very least 6. The main function of apprehending its object, and each of the functions of what we call the omnipresent factors. But then it can do so much more. It can be angry, or it can feel endless compassion. And those are described differently by the mental factors. And it becomes clear that despite the separate language, that they are similar, is that, for instance, as Mikhail Jamba, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, he pointed out in the discussion groups that the main mind and its mental factors share certain qualities. There are actually 5 qualities. They have the same focal object, they have the same apprehended object. So they focus on the same object, they apprehend the same object. They arise from the same sense faculty. So either a sense faculty or a mental faculty, so the cause is the same. Main cause that gives rise to it. They occur at the same time, and they're the same substantial entity. Right? Those are the 5 qualities. So in fact, they're the same mind. That's just a complicated way of saying they're the same consciousness. They're the same person, Droka. In the case of the analogy, one person performing different functions, having different aspects of her identity, which are secondary to the identity of being a living being. Right? Because to have this identity, she has to keep alive. She has to be a living being, in the sense, keeping alive. She has to stay alive, in other words. And separating it the way they do, as if they were different entities, well, it's like when you're a doctor. Of course, the heart is part of the body, the arm is part of the body, the brain is part of the body, but you kind of learn about them separately, as if they were totally independent, separate entities that, you just can understand them out of context. But in order to understand them fully, to always see how they're interconnected with the rest of the body, you never understand the particular organ, right? It's too complicated. Oh, the heart is connected to the liver. No, we're just talking about the heart. Let's stick to the heart. Similarly, just as our body is very intricate, very complicated, so is our mind. So complicated. In each moment, it can be so fast, right? It's so fast. Our mind can be so quick, thinking about this, thinking about that, switching back and forth. We're not even aware of that. It's just doing its own thing. And every now and then we feel like exhausted by the speed of it, or by certain mental factors that just pull us down. The first step is to understanding that mind, to observe it, but to also learn about it in advance. Okay, all right, like a surgeon. First you have a model of a heart until you look at the actual heart and now operate on it. But first you use a representation of that before you look at the actual thing. Likewise, when we study Buddhism, we first learn about this mind and that mental factors and its object and how it functions, and is it a correct mind or not. And once we have a rough sense, then we look at our own mind, or maybe even earlier than that, and try to identify them. Oh, anger. Oh yeah. Interesting. Wow, it's been with me for an hour. Thank you. Give me some time to watch it. Right? Really get to know your own mind. Without that, it's just all out over there. Mind and mental factors are over there. It's your neighbor's anger. It's never your own. And of course, it's impossible to change. So it's very important to then look inward and try to identify these states of mind through mindfulness. Anyway, to understand the relationship between the 6 consciousnesses and their mental factors, another analogy may be helpful. Think 6 rivers that flow side by side. Those are our 6 consciousnesses. So the river is a nice analogy because our mind is often described like a mental stream, a stream of awareness that goes on and is constantly changing. Sometimes it's calm, sometimes it's all over the place, right? Like a river, it can be very calm, or its water can be churning, it can be turbulent, so forth. So each river represents one type of consciousness: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought, mental consciousness. And the water in each river, that represents the main mind. That's the basic kind of aspect of a river. It's water. Okay. While then the ripples, the currents, the swirls, the turbulence, whatever, those are like the mental factors. So you cannot separate the water from its movement, but you can conceptually look at each one of them. So each type of consciousness maintains its own functional unity between its main mind and mental factors. And just as several rivers can flow at the same time, so can these 6 minds operate together. All right, so 6 types of consciousness, each has its own unique functions, and from that point of view we speak about main function and all the secondary yet essential functions. And on top of the 5, right, especially with the mental consciousness, you can add a lot. Can it be full of love, it can be full of compassion, it can have calm, it can be very calm. On the other hand, it can be very focused. So all these qualities or these functions can arise together. And in order to understand each one of them, we describe them as different mental factors. So the same mind from the point of view of being very focused. The same mind from the point of view of being compassionate. The same mind from the point of view of aspiring towards becoming fully enlightened. All right? Okay. I hope that's clear. So they're not separate. They're just seen, the same entity seen from different perspectives. Like Droka the nun or the 6 rivers flowing at the same time. Okay, I hope that explains it a little bit. So don't forget, even if they sound as if they were totally separate, just don't forget, just seen from different perspectives, referred to or talked of from different perspectives in terms of their functions, but they refer to the same mental stream. That's one thing I wanted to clarify. And then, of course, it's very helpful to have Geshe Rabden's descriptions in here. If you now read I think it was Vada sent these first 3 pages from Geshe Rabden's book on mind and mental factors. Not sure it's still in print. It's an older Dharma book, but yeah, if you can get a copy, that would be helpful to read. And then there's also Mind and Tibetan Buddhism, but I think that's a little shorter on mind and mental factors. I don't think it has that much explanation in it. Okay, that's one thing I wanted to address. Also, regarding Vanu's question about whether compassion focuses on all sentient beings, and in response to that, yeah, we clarified that. Mikael sent a nice comment here saying, definitely great compassion is for all beings, yourself included. Buddhahood is said to accomplish the 2 benefits, our own benefit and that of others. In tantric terms, it is the Dharmakaya that accomplishes our own welfare. This is not just in tantric terms, this is also in sutric terms. This is generally true. When we talk about the Buddha's qualities, kaya is the word that is used. I prefer to use the English word qualities. There are qualities that directly benefit the Buddha, and then there are qualities that directly benefit others. So the qualities that directly benefit the Buddha are described as the Dharmakaya, which includes the Buddha's mind. We cannot perceive a Buddha's mind. I mean, even if we could, we'd be so overwhelmed by the Buddha's mind's qualities. Yeah, we couldn't really fathom the abilities that the mind has. But they also include the cessations in the Buddha's mind. So the absence of the obscurations that are still very much in our mind. And other qualities that we don't need to go into, like even the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. So that is the Dharmakaya. And then you have the Rupakaya, which is the physical emanation of a Buddha. The physical aspect of a Buddha that we can communicate with. We can see a Buddha, we can hear his or her words, we can be inspired by their I don't know, outer appearance. Yeah, so that is true for both Sutra and Tantra. They explain them in a very similar way. The vocabulary or the terminology is definitely the same. And then he says, yeah, well, understanding how I myself cycle within samsara, so whether you think about the 12 links, or no, whether you think about the Four Noble Truths, that's a very effective way to reflect on how we cycle in samsara and how we can get out of it. And the extended version, or the extensive version of the Four Noble Truths is the 12 links. So based on that, we then generate an understanding. We can get rid of our afflictions, we can get rid of our suffering and attain liberation. And once we understand that, we understand others can do so too. Yeah, so that's definitely what Mikhail writes, yes, absolutely. Then Leipang, he asked the question about mental factors. Okay, that has been answered. So Leipang's question, are all sense consciousnesses, are they main minds? No. I mean, even sense consciousness and eye consciousness being a main mind, that's a little, if you debate, it's like, it's not in itself a main mind, it's not a mental factor. It has an aspect that's a main mind, and it has an aspect that's a mental factor, right? Depending on what function you're thinking of. Does that make sense? From the point of view of perceiving its object, we say sense consciousness is a main mind. From the point of view of discerning the different aspects, for instance, of its object, we speak of it as a mental factor. All right. But Maud's question I want to get to. Maud, and I read this last time, but this is something so important. Because the way Buddhism is taught pretty much is, at the very beginning, you're told to generate the motivation to become enlightened. And in the beginning, you're like, what is that enlightenment? Why should I wish to become enlightened? No. I'm happy who I am, or I don't know. Especially in the beginning, it's like, I don't even think about it. You know, it's just what you do. Such an important motivation. Sometimes I do adjust it a little bit, you know, to be of greater benefit to others, and I leave it at that. But this is an advanced class, so I went right into wish for Buddhahood. But of course, wow, understanding that that is possible is really difficult. How does she put it? She puts it in a really nice way. I always come back to the same question. How can we be convinced enlightenment is the best way to help all sentient beings? Seeing where we are, considering what the previous Buddhas are able to do for us. Well, are they helping us in the best way now? It doesn't seem like, hey, you Buddhas, what are you doing? Taking a vacation? I'm still suffering. No, I'm joking. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but are they helping us the best way? If the last one, why is there anything else needed to be done from the side of helping at least? Why is there anything else needed? The problem is we have to mainly do it ourselves. It says in the sutra, we are our own protector, right? We are our own protector. Unfortunately, no one can do it for us. In fact, I can only change one thing. One thing I can totally gain control over and change it. But it's really just one thing. What could that be? My mind. My own mind. I cannot change your mind. Even with my body, the way it is right now, I cannot change that. I mean, right now, at this point, what can I can't even change my sense consciousnesses. Make me be able to see without glasses. It's not going to happen. Or hear better, hear like an eagle or whatever. Do eagles have good ears? No, it's their eyes, right? Hear like a dog, okay. All right. So I can't do that. So the one thing I can change right now is my own mind. And I can totally transform that. And through transforming that, in the long term, I can cause, the change of my mental consciousness can affect a different body in the future, taking on eventually the body of an enlightened being, for instance, with not these limited sense consciousnesses. But for right now, what I can do, as long as I have this body, until the moment I die, until my mind and body separate, my own mind. Right? So a Buddha is just like that. A Buddha has already made that change, but can only really teach us how to get there. And then we still have to all do it ourselves. Right? It's like giving us instructions. It's like the example I gave of the physician, the doctor, can tell us what to eat and not to eat, to exercise or what exercise to do, which medicine to take, you know, the whole scale of advice they can give us, and we still have to do it. They're not going to do it for us, can't do it for us. So it's just the very first step. The texts are just the very first step. That's why, different to other religions, they're not considered to be, how can I put it? They're not even considered the evidence that something, that for instance, the fact that phenomena lack inherent existence. There's no evidence. If I say, oh, it's because the Buddha said so, it doesn't help me. It doesn't help me. Oh, phenomena don't exist inherently because Buddha Shakyamuni said so very eloquently. So what? It doesn't help me. The fact that he said so and gave me reasons and presented the reasons for why, it helps me to then sit down and really reflect on it and come to the conclusion, yeah, because phenomena are interdependent, they can't exist inherently. He was right. I can come to that conclusion, but I have to do all the work myself. So there's actually not that much they can do for us. It's a lot in comparison to what ordinary people can do for us. But most of the work we have to do ourselves, unfortunately. And we come from a background, Judeo-Christian, Abrahamic faith kind of background, where we learn since we're little, Jesus our Savior, or you know, whoever else is our Savior. No, sorry. That's why I don't like when the word Savior is used in some translations, because Buddha is not our Savior. We are our own Savior. We can become our own Savior. It's in our own hand. Simply because we have to change our mind, our thoughts, and only we can do that. No one can do it for us. So Buddhas can do a lot. They can point out, they can guide us, they can be an inspiration, etc. But how can we even know that enlightenment is possible? What is enlightenment? And how can it be the best way to help others? That's a really profound question. I mean, the second chapter of the Pramanavartika pretty much deals with that. Like, it's a very, very difficult text, and it deals with exactly that. But just to say a few words about it, I did say a little bit at the end of last class, oh, look at the great lamas, you know, what they can do for us. Yeah, that helps, but there's more to it. We need to just look at our own life. Look at our own mind. That's the best, what's it called? I always forget that word. That's the best, like in a laboratory, like you have a dish. Petri dish. A Petri dish. I should tattoo it on my, every time it comes up. It comes up all the time and I always forget. Like a Petri dish. You know, like your own mind is like your own Petri dish. That's what you examine now. You experiment with it. Especially with this question about Buddhahood. Is this really possible? Just watch your own mind. Where does all our trouble come from? It's not enough me telling you and you believing it. You need to come to a first-hand conclusion. Wow, my main problem is, and what's most obviously first, is my self-obsession. Every time we have a problem, just check. Is self-centeredness, is it involved or not? If there were no self-centeredness, would I be worried? If it wasn't my stuff that was stolen, my family that was having a problem, my reputation that was just trashed, right? My feelings being hurt by someone insulting me. My feelings hurt. How does that even work? Which feeling was hurt? Right? My feelings were hurt. Anyway, so really check. And you come to the conclusion, it's always the self-centered mind. If we didn't have that, so what? Insult me, whatever. It's just words, right? It doesn't destroy who I am. Either they're right, so it helps me to see my mistakes, or if they're wrong, well, they're just wrong. Who cares, actually? And if the same words are told to my neighbor, I don't care, right? I don't care. Maybe I'm even happy about it. So it shows the self-centered mind is always involved. You have to really recognize that. So all our discomfort comes from the self-centered mind. And the self-centered mind gives rise to other afflictions like anger, aversion, hatred, jealousy, competitiveness, all these mental factors that are painful when they arise. They're not comfortable. And they make us do things that are extreme. And these extreme actions lead to extreme experiences, which is another word for unwanted experiences. Right? Experiences we don't want to experience, we don't want to have. It's just another way of saying karma. So if you think about that, the real perpetrator is the self-centered attitude. Okay, but what comes before that self-centered? Why am I so obsessed with myself? That's a little harder. So you dig deeper and come to the conclusion the way I might perceive myself is such that there's a very concrete I. That's harder to do. But let's still try it. Okay, how do I perceive of myself? Is there a very concrete I? Okay. And then if you continue with that, you can come to the conclusion, well, but I can't exist, right? So this is only after really studying for some time, getting a fuller picture of Buddhist views. It all falls into place. It's like every subject you study. I was going to say puzzles. It's too quick. So every topic you study is like a piece of a puzzle. Initially, there's this piece and that piece and this piece and that piece, and it's like, okay, every piece I understand, but how does it all fit together? But then when you study many of these different topics, at some point it all comes together. You see the whole picture, right? You see the whole picture, how it's all connected, it all makes sense. With one piece missing, the picture is incomplete. So with more and more study, it takes time, right? But different topics you study, and there's a limit to them. I mean, it's not like limitless. Well, no, actually there's a limit. It feels limitless when you start, but no, there is actually a certain limit. But of course, the deeper you go into each puzzle piece, at the end, the more complete your picture. And then it's like, there is no other way. I mean, I'm so convinced, without understanding it, without knowing every puzzle piece well, but just the course, the rough understanding I have, helps me to look at the picture, and there is nothing else makes sense. Nothing else makes sense. I'm totally convinced of that. I wasn't always, but now I am. That the self-centered attitude comes from that misperception. And from all the little I understand about emptiness, it's just impossible that it exists that way. Not that I understand, but I'm at least convinced. I believe in that. So therefore, since that's not in accordance with reality, all we need to do, and I make it sound easier than it is really fully understanding the self doesn't exist that way. If that gives rise to the self-obsession, then it's gone. If you don't have the seed, you don't have a sprout. It's as simple as that. You destroy the seed, you destroy the sprout. The sprout won't even arise. Now, if the root of all our afflictions, and like I said, if you observe long enough, you learn about the Dharma long enough, and you observe your own mind, you can come to a kind of conclusion. Okay, that self-centered attitude. No, I mean this is rooted in that misperception. That can't be any other way. Why would I believe in myself in the way I do? Right? So it is possible. Therefore, once I understand emptiness, that mind just can go away. I mean, I can get rid of this mind. It's not that easy. It might sound easier than it is. It takes some getting used to it, familiarizing with the mind, but it's possible. Just like, for instance, if I look at the rainbow and I believe it to be very solid and concrete, rainbow exists, but as solidly and concretely as it appears to me, it doesn't exist. So once I understand it doesn't exist in that concrete way, my misconception of the rainbow as something concrete and etc., it will go away. And that means everything else that this misconception gives rise to. So there's no problem with the rainbow's misperception, but the misperception of the I, as we all know, is a huge problem. All that goes away. And once it's gone, well, then I call that mind a liberated mind. That's it. I mean, it's not that difficult to understand. It's just really hard to achieve that. That's liberation. So liberation is just a mind that is no longer influenced by that misconception, because the misconception has been eradicated from the mind by understanding how things really exist. That's it. Liberation. It's not a place we go to. It's not, I don't know, nothingness or whatever. No, we continue to exist, but with a happier and satisfied mind. That's just liberation. The next step is then, well, what about Buddhahood? That's a little bit harder to understand. But what we can come to understand is the tendency of our afflictions to leave something on the mind, like a residue. That would be the next step. That we have tendencies, like residues or imprints are like tendencies. Right? When we're angry, for instance, when we're angry now, tomorrow we're more likely to be angry again. Even though the anger today is gone. Let's say we did a great job for 1 month, we didn't get angry at all. We got used to not, losing our temper. But then one day I'm like, I just don't care, I didn't sleep well, and this person is annoying. I'm just going to be really angry. So the anger flares up, remains for, I don't know, a few minutes or maybe half an hour. It fades, and the next day it's so much quicker to get angry. Why is that? Because the anger left something in our mind. It's not the anger itself, because we're not angry right now, but there was an imprint, something left in the mind that makes it that much easier to get angry tomorrow. This is true for every mind, even for compassion. We meditate on compassion today, it's easier to be compassionate in the future. Every time we leave something in the mind that makes it easier for that mind to arise again. Now, we're not worried about these tendencies when it comes to compassion. We are worried about these tendencies when it comes to anger, our misperception of reality, and so forth. So the thing is, we can remove the afflictions, but the tendencies will remain. They're deeper intertwined with our mind, and it requires more of an effort. So after you're liberated, the tendencies are still there. Lama Tsongkhapa talks about them. We'll come to them. Anger. What happens with the tendency of anger? What happens with the tendency of the misconception of reality, and so forth. The point is, if we remove these as well, which can only be removed once we become a Buddha, right? Then our mind is totally pure of anything that is in the way to do what the mind does best, to know. And then combined with our ability now to effortlessly have love and compassion for all sentient beings, because there's no residue left from our self-centeredness, from our obsession with the I, then we can fully dedicate ourselves towards the benefit of others and guide them in the most effective way, to lead them to that same state. How could that not be the best solution? So if we reflect on that, if we have some understanding of that and reflect on it, it makes perfectly sense. Which takes me to the discussion we had last time. So it seems to be a bit of a jump, but let's go back to the text. So today, sorry, I started a little later than usual, but I wanted to get this out of the way because I thought these were important questions. Banu also asked another question, but I can't address this today, but I will next time. I have to think about it a little bit. And I also really like how everyone reacts, or a lot of people react in the group. This is great, answering these questions. That's very nice. I want to take my time and read through it. But the thing is this. Last time we had this discussion, well, let's look at the text. We had this discussion about the three types of mind, the compassionate mind and non-dual cognition and bodhicitta, that these are the causes of bodhisattvas. Okay. Compassion, fine. Compassion precedes every bodhisattva. You have to have great compassion before you can become a bodhisattva. No problem here. But what about bodhicitta? Bodhicitta is the cause of a bodhisattva? Right? Is it a cause of a bodhisattva? Here we've heard, we're talking about not an explanatory cause, we're talking about a producing cause. This explanatory cause, it's a weird term that is not very common. An explanatory term is really, explanatory cause, sorry, the term explanatory cause. It basically means a reason that establishes that something is such and such. So what is the explanatory cause of a bodhisattva? That he or she has bodhicitta, right? So that's like an explanatory cause in the sense, it's like a characteristic, a main characteristic of a bodhisattva is having bodhicitta. Therefore, we could say, okay, bodhicitta, it establishes that a person is a bodhisattva. It's an explanatory cause. It helps to establish, as a reason, it's like a main characteristic of a bodhisattva, so it establishes that this person is a bodhisattva. But it's not a productive cause. It's not like a bodhisattva has to be... A productive cause is like an actual cause, a cause that precedes the bodhisattva. For instance, a seed must precede a sprout. Okay? An effect, such as a karmic effect of, experiencing poverty, is the result of a karmic productive cause, which is, for instance, miserliness or stealing from others. Therefore, a cause must always, a productive cause, which is the same as an actual cause, must always precede its result. But a bodhisattva is not preceded by bodhicitta. It marks the first moment. If you have bodhicitta, the first moment you've generated bodhicitta, from that moment onward, you're called a bodhisattva. So it doesn't precede you, it accompanies you as a bodhisattva. All right. Having said that, what is meant here? That was your homework. Remember your homework? I asked you, what does it mean here? What is the meaning of this text talking about a bodhisattva is preceded by bodhicitta? The cause of a bodhisattva is bodhicitta. Did anyone continue reading? Because the answer is in the text. Not those who were not here last time, but those who were here last time. Do you remember? Did you do the homework? I'm not going to ask to raise your hands.
what
Yes.
I understood,
Yes.
one is entering the club and one is already enters the club. It means like an aspiration. May I help someone? May I develop bodhicitta? But it's not a full-fledged bodhicitta.
Oh, are you talking about generating the aspiration to become enlightened, or the aspiration to generate bodhicitta?
Aspiring to develop bodhicitta.
Oh no, but that's not called bodhicitta. The aspiration to generate bodhicitta is not bodhicitta. The aspiration to become fully enlightened, that is bodhicitta, right? I want to become enlightened, and of course for the benefit of all sentient beings. Remember the two aspects of bodhicitta? I mentioned two aspects. I went back to Maitreya's text. Not back, but I talked about Maitreya's text. I spoke about it in the sense we have two really important topics when we study in the Tibetan tradition. There are 5 main topics, but it's hard to say which are the most important ones, but I guess the 2 are really, really important. One is Parchin and one is this. Parchin and Uma, to use the Tibetan words. So the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras and Madhyamika. The Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, they deal with the vast aspect of Buddhism, the different path. So they describe very beautifully what bodhicitta is, saying that bodhicitta has 2 main elements. One element that is great compassion, which precedes bodhicitta, and one element that accompanies bodhicitta, which is the aspiration to become enlightened, the wish to become enlightened. So the wish to benefit all sentient beings precedes bodhicitta, and the wish to become enlightened accompanies bodhicitta. So bodhicitta must have both aspects. It's because you previously generated compassion that now you wanting to become enlightened is for the benefit of sentient beings, is for the benefit of all sentient beings. Yeah? So it's not for the benefit of yourself or just because today is Thursday. No, you want to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings because of your compassion previously. Does that make sense? So it's your compassion that is the driving force. It's that it tells you why you want to become enlightened. Yeah? And wanting to become enlightened, which is part of bodhicitta, is just how you can accomplish your wish to benefit sentient beings. Now, having said all this, this is what is explained in the subject of Parchin. And Parchin, when we study Parchin, we study actually a commentary by Maitreya, which is called Abhisamaya Alamkara, or Ornament for Clear Realizations. And in that text, in the first chapter, bodhicitta is explained very extensively. Okay, so bodhicitta here, in this text, they base their explanation on bodhicitta in the same way, right? It has to have these 2 elements. There's no contradiction in the way in which Chandrakirti here explains bodhicitta. But bodhicitta doesn't precede a bodhisattva. It doesn't. That's one aspect. And it says that the mind realizing emptiness precedes a bodhisattva. It's the cause of a bodhisattva, so it must precede a bodhisattva. What is this? You have to realize emptiness first and then you generate bodhicitta? It seems like we're talking about bodhicitta, generate bodhicitta, and once you have it, then you deal with emptiness. That's how it comes across, right? I mean, even like we started class with bodhicitta. We don't start with emptiness. Maybe we start with great compassion and then we work our way up to bodhicitta as the motivation. But we don't talk about emptiness as part of that. And in fact, once you have bodhicitta, you train in the 6 perfections. And in the 6 perfections, emptiness is last. Wisdom realizing emptiness is last. So it seems like first you generate bodhicitta, then you practice the 6 perfections, and it's way down the line that you get to paramita number or perfection number 6 and think about emptiness. So what's going on here? Did anyone read in advance? Did anyone do the homework? Yeah, well, a little work, I guess it would be good. I mean, yeah, if you can make a little bit of time, just 10 minutes. All you need to do is read a little bit further. Yeah, and the other homework I asked you to do was, remember the sentence here, what does it say about the two options? Oh, the two folds. Oh no, the second option and this is the first option. Did anyone figure that one out? It says here, as part of the reply, since the exact folds you have leveled above will ensue, we do not accept the second option but subscribe to the first. Did anyone figure that out? No, okay, never mind. The text is difficult. Okay, let me just explain it. Okay, this whole argument here, bodhicitta does not precede bodhisattva. Now there is a debate coming up here, and I guess it existed at the time of Lama Tsongkhapa. I guess that was a debate because it seems odd to say bodhicitta is a cause of a bodhisattva. It doesn't actually, it's not correct. Literally, it doesn't work. So then someone suggested, oh, we're not talking about a new bodhisattva here, a beginner bodhisattva here. We're talking about an advanced bodhisattva. Let's talk about an advanced bodhisattva. So the initial bodhicitta that they generated for the first time, remember in the beginning, or a few minutes ago, I said, what marks the first moment of a bodhisattva? The first moment of bodhicitta. So for the first time, if you generate bodhicitta, you walk home now, on your way home, you're overcome by great compassion, and for some reason, due to your previous practice, you generate true bodhicitta for the first time. So now you're called a bodhisattva. Okay? Now that new bodhicitta is the cause of your being an advanced bodhisattva. Let's say after a few years, your bodhicitta has grown stronger and stronger and stronger. You're now on the path, you're on the path of preparation. You've really come a long way. Your practice is going well. That initial bodhicitta, was that the cause of you now as an advanced? Yes, one of your causes. So someone argues, the advanced bodhisattva, that's what's meant here. Oh, an advanced bodhisattva, he or she is preceded by great compassion, the initial bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. Yeah, once you're on the path of preparation, you must have realized emptiness. It all works out. It's all quite nice. It seems like, yeah, that's a good solution. But Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't want to have any of that. He says, no, it can't be. And here he's not his own opinion. It's not a matter of his own view. He's following Chandrakirti. He's following Chandrakirti to the letter. Now, how many texts does he follow here? Chandrakirti's text. How many are there? How many texts does Lama Tsongkhapa rely on in his writing by Chandrakirti? Two. What are they?
One is entering the middle way.
One is entering the middle way.
And the second is commentary to
the auto-commentary. The auto-commentary. Now, if you read the auto-commentary, you know Tibetan.
clear words. Clear words.
No, clear words is not the auto-commentary. That's a commentary on the fundamental wisdom. It's a little confusing. No, the auto-commentary. So Chandrakirti, after he had composed Entering the Middle Way, he probably felt, oh, this is maybe a little confusing, I better explain what I meant. So he wrote this very extensive auto-commentary. And based on that, Lama Tsongkhapa wrote his commentary. Now, if you can read the auto-commentary, you'll actually, if you understand Lama Tsongkhapa, you understand the auto-commentary. Once you understood this text, you then go back to the auto-commentary, you completely understand it. A lot of explanation here are taken from that text. So it's really like a key that opens the door to the auto-commentary. All right. So Lama Tsongkhapa says the bodhisattva here that gives rise to the Buddha. Remember in the previous line, Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas. That's not an advanced bodhisattva. Likewise, the three types of mind, bodhicitta, great compassion, and the mind realizing emptiness, they're not the causes of an advanced bodhisattva. How does he know that? Because of what went before. Two things. Remember the Heap of Jewels Sutra? The Heap of Jewels Sutra. I believe in a hard copy it's page 40, and in the PDF it's page 55, I think. In the hard copy, can you confirm that? It says, for example, in the Heap of Jewels Sutra. Is that page 40? 41. Okay, it's always around that. Okay. And then the PDF, it would be, the Kindle version is page 50, and I think it's 5 pages more. So anyway, this is all from the auto commentary. In the auto commentary, first of all, he says, he gives the sutra, or he cites the sutra, Heap of Jewels Sutra. Kashyapa, it is thus, for instance, one pays homage to the new moon, but not to the full moon. So a beginner, new moon. And not just that. Above that quote, you have the 4 grounds or the 4 reasons for such eulogizing. So just above the quote from the Heap of Jewels Sutra. Why are bodhisattvas praised here? Why talking about bodhisattvas being the cause of Buddhas? Why talking about them as being so special? And 4 reasons are given. One is because they're the perfect cause of Buddhahood. Secondly, once you praise the bodhisattvas, implicitly you praise the Buddhas. And number 3, just as when one sees the young sprout with its main stalk and so on of a medicinal tree that could produce desired fruits, just like Buddhahood, one nurtures the plant with special care, just like the bodhisattva, during its sapling stage. So it's like when you have the very tiny sapling that gives rise to a medicinal tree, which is like Buddhahood. That little sapling, that's what you cherish a lot. So that's a beginner bodhisattva. It's not an advanced bodhisattva. Remember we talked about this, how many of the lamas, when they look at the practitioners, the beginners, they know this is precious, this is hard, it's not easy. They are more likely to maybe give up bodhicitta. In the beginning, you can lose bodhicitta. You can lose bodhicitta. Therefore, you need to be especially careful, yeah, and look after, nurture that particular person. So this comes from Chandrakirti himself. He talks about the bodhisattva in this context. It's exactly as part of this particular part in the text. He says, these are like the saplings. We have to be super careful. They're like the new moon. So this is Lama Tsongkhapa's argument. He's not just thinking for no reason that here we're talking about a new bodhisattva, not an advanced bodhisattva. All right? And then he gives the answer after torturing you with this. He's saying, bodhicitta we're talking about here that precedes that new bodhisattva is contrived bodhicitta. Last time there was a nun from Australia here and she kind of whispered, contrived bodhicitta. She knew the answer. She had previously studied at Institute de Lama Tsongkhapa. So the answer is exactly that. Contrived bodhicitta. You see, and this is again beautiful that this is what's meant. To fully understand, bodhicitta is not going to pop up one day just from itself, on its own. We have to practice it first. We have to meditate on it. It's contrived first. It's not the real deal yet. We really need to work hard. It doesn't come naturally. We have to generate it again and again and again. Only when it comes spontaneously. When it one day arises spontaneously without having to go through the different steps, then can we call it uncontrived bodhicitta, and then it's real bodhicitta. But what's beautiful here is that it points out, be aware, you need to have contrived bodhicitta first. You're not a bodhisattva yet, but at least you're on the way there. And that contrived bodhicitta is a cause of a bodhisattva. It precedes a bodhisattva. Once your contrived bodhicitta has given rise or has given way to uncontrived bodhicitta, then you're a bodhisattva. That's beautiful, isn't it? That's a good reason. That makes sense. And that's exactly what it says on the next page. It says here, nonetheless, the fold you have cited earlier, that's on my page 54. Wait, is it 54, 53? It's sometimes difficult to see. 54. On my page 54, in the book it's probably 44 or 45, and in the PDF it's 59. So it says, nonetheless, the fault you have cited earlier will not arise for us, because the generation of the awakening mind, that is bodhicitta, prior to the bodhisattva stage, is understood in terms of the meditative cultivation of the awakening mind. When you're still cultivating that mind, it does not refer to the actual generated mind, the actual bodhicitta that has arisen on the basis of such cultivation. All right? So it's just telling us, yeah, it needs a lot of familiarization, it needs a lot of meditation. Again and again, you have to familiarize with this mind. You generate contrived bodhicitta, but it's not enough to do it once or twice. You have to do it over and over and over and over again, which is why we do it at the beginning of class. We do it in the beginning of the day when we start in the morning. The first thing we start our practice with is that. And hopefully we remember throughout the day, and again and again and again. Thanks to neuroplasticity, something is happening. It doesn't go unnoticed. Our brain is slowly changing. If saying the mind is slowly changing doesn't convince us, well, maybe the brain slowly changing is new synapses are formed, it's like, whoa, my brain is changing. Yeah, I mean, literally, it's true. The brain is changing, and thereby the mind is changing. Or the mind is changing, thereby the brain is changing. Very important. We have to hang in there. Cultivate it again and again. Don't give up. What's better to do in life? What's more meaningful? We've tried everything else on the samsaric level. And we've done everything. Like I said, there's nothing. We were the most powerful person at some point, the richest person, the most popular person, the most famous, what have you. And see what it got us. Nothing. We're back at zero. Good old samsara. Nothing. No lasting happiness. All right, let's try something new. Generate great compassion, bodhicitta, and see how we feel. Whether things get easier, right? We find more happiness, but we have to try it first. That's the big experiment. So then, of course, what's most important is to do it again and again and again. That's difficult in the beginning. That's like someone telling you, if you do this exercise every day, one day you'll be free of this disease. And you keep doing it, and the disease is still there, and it takes some time before you see a result. Anyway, I hope this is clear now. The first part of this, when the three minds, the awakening mind that precedes, that is a cause of a bodhisattva, is not an actual bodhicitta, it's the contrived version. But now we're still left with the mind realizing emptiness. Why does that have to precede a bodhisattva? Does it have to precede a bodhisattva? No, it doesn't. It's recommended. In that, you remember I talked about the two types of practitioners, the one of sharp faculty and the one of dull faculty. Now, last time I kind of said, oh, it's okay to be of dull faculty, because I've had people come and see me and say like, oh, I cannot do Dharma practice. I want to be of sharp faculty. it doesn't make sense, emptiness is so difficult, or it makes sense but I don't understand it, or whatever. Bodhicitta seems so much easier, I'm just on the wrong. And I'm like, then just choose the other path. There's still the option of generating, right? It's not the end of the world to not realize emptiness first. But in general, the texts talk about the kind of practitioner who, before generating bodhicitta, they want to know, because what do you want? What do you aspire to when you have bodhicitta? Enlightenment. They want to know whether enlightenment exists. They want to realize enlightenment. Now that is really difficult. Realize as in incontrovertibly understand. That's really not easy. And what do you have to understand? To understand Buddhahood? Emptiness. Why? Anyone? Why do you have to understand incontrovertibly know emptiness in order to know Buddhahood, that Buddhahood exists? Why? What's the reason?
The nature of our mind is the emptiness.
The nature of our mind is emptiness.
Same, the nature of the Buddha is emptiness. It's the same emptiness.
Okay, it's the
Well,
same
the nature
emptiness.
was-
Yes, okay, all right. But there's another reason as well. I'm not even going to say it. So the nature of our mind is emptiness, the nature of the Buddha's mind is emptiness, so both lack inherent existence. So unless they lacked inherent existence, our mind couldn't transform into the mind of a Buddha, Venerable Kumbin is saying. Okay, I accept that. But there's another more specific reason, actually. Pardon?
Buddha nature.
No, it's not about Buddha nature as such. Let's go back to what I said earlier. In order to understand that liberation is possible, I need to understand what is the main perpetrator. What's the root cause of all our problems? It's it's ignorance, the misconception of reality. But to me right now, that seems a perfectly correct mind. Honestly, I perceive everything to exist inherently. So I have no sense that phenomena couldn't exist inherently. From my experience, existence and inherent existence are the same. So if I understand that this table exists, to me it means this table exists inherently. My understanding of the existence of this table does not differ from my sense that this table exists inherently. Therefore, to me, the mind that is the misconception, the root ignorance, is a correct mind. Now, the first step is to understand it's not a correct mind. Its object doesn't exist, which is what? Inherent existence doesn't exist. So to understand that something is a wrong mind, I need to know that its main object is not possible. Let's go back to the solid, tangible rainbow. To understand that the mind that perceives a solid, tangible rainbow is a wrong consciousness, I first need to understand that there are no concrete, tangible rainbows. Yes, there are rainbows, but no tangible, concrete rainbows. So in order to understand that that is a wrong consciousness, I must know its object doesn't exist. Similarly, to know that the main cause for all my trouble is a misconception, I must understand that that misconception is a wrong consciousness. To know it's a main consciousness, I must know that its main object, for instance, the inherent existence of the I, doesn't exist. The I exists, yes, but not the inherent existence of the I. So once I understand the inherent existence of the I doesn't exist, that's the same as knowing the emptiness of the I. Does that make sense? I'll say it again. To understand that the misconception of reality is the root cause. Once I've understood that is the root cause, I need to now know that it can be eliminated. But it can only be eliminated if it's a wrong consciousness. If it's a correct consciousness, you can't eliminate it. How can you eliminate it? Right? Why would I eliminate it? No, it's a wrong consciousness. I have to recognize that it's a wrong consciousness. Then it can be eliminated by the mind that is its antidote. Right? So for that, I need to know that it's a wrong consciousness. In other words, I need to know that its main object, inherent existence, is ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense. And that's the same as understanding emptiness. Right? So once I understand emptiness, then, okay, this mind is mistaken. And it's the root of all my trouble. If I remove it, I can be liberated. And if I remove its imprints, I can become a Buddha. Ah, Buddhahood is possible. Right? I make it sound very, very simple, but in the end it's a bit like, oh, it goes down to emptiness exists. Therefore the misconception of reality is a wrong consciousness. It can be removed by the mind that realizes emptiness. Right? If I want to remove the wrong, let's say I believe there's a ghost in my cupboard. Right? There's a ghost in my cupboard. That's a misconception. There's no ghost in my cupboard. But I keep believing, I have fear, I have all this problem, I can't sleep. So all I need to do is check. Oh, no ghost in the cupboard. Oh, that was a wrong consciousness because its object cannot be found. The ghost can't be found. That's like knowing emptiness. Oh, all my problems solved. No longer, no sleepless nights, no fear, no this. Similarly, in a little bit deeper way, of course, it affects us more profoundly than the view that there's a ghost in the cupboard. But still, in a similar way, as long as I'm convinced there's inherent existence, it'll give rise to all my other afflictions. Once I know there's no inherent existence, I can remove that misconception, right? And then be liberated. So before I go through that process, if I understand emptiness, that mind is a wrong consciousness. It can be removed. It's not as simple as knowing there's no ghost. You know, I look, it's no ghost, and all my fear is gone. Unfortunately, our misconception is so much deeper ingrained in our mind that just knowing emptiness won't remove our misconception. It requires more work. But that's the first step. Okay? Therefore, to understand Buddhahood and liberation are possible, I need to know emptiness exists. I need to realize emptiness. And those practitioners who are not satisfied with someone telling them, you know, there is Buddhahood, however convincing it may be, there are those who are like sharper faculty in that sense. It's like, no, first I want to know firsthand this is true. I want to know for myself. And those are those of greater capacity, it's said. And it's really just putting it out there, saying, first of all, the main disciples of this text, because this is a difficult text, are practitioners who are of sharper faculty. But it's also encouraging us to develop that sharp faculty. Whether in the end we realize emptiness first or generate bodhicitta first, at some point in the future, doesn't matter. The point is it encourages us to not forget emptiness. Wisdom and bodhicitta need to be combined, right? So to combine the two, and ideally know emptiness before we generate bodhicitta. But even if it doesn't happen, don't worry. Right? If you generate bodhicitta tomorrow, wow, you haven't realized emptiness, don't worry. I'll throw a party. No, I'm not joking actually. It's incredible if you can actually generate bodhicitta, of course. Surely you wouldn't go around and say so and you wouldn't find out. But the point is that, one is better than the other. But in the end, it's okay to go the other way, like first to generate bodhicitta. But the point here is that what is meant here is a practitioner, a bodhisattva of great spiritual or great mental faculty who realizes emptiness first before generating bodhicitta. That's the meaning. All right? So such a bodhisattva first generates contrite bodhicitta, first realizes emptiness, and first generates great compassion. Solved. Problem solved. Right? That's the debate here. Does that make sense? Could you repeat it back to me? No, it doesn't matter. The first time I heard it, I was like, what? I understood it for 2 minutes. I was out of the room and I was like, what did you talk about? Totally normal. You hear it once, you hear it twice, and it gets easier. Yeah, it really gets easier. That's a good thing. All right, great.
That's when you're very plasticity.
Pardon?
Hearing it again and again.
Yeah, hearing it again and again really helps. Yes, reading in advance. That's why I keep asking, if you have the time, read it once or twice. I mean, read it once, don't understand anything, have a cup of tea, read it again, read it a third time. It makes a huge difference. Even though you have a sense, I didn't understand anything. And still, it's different. When I went to class, and it was in a different language, it was in Tibetan. So it was even harder than reading this in English. I always read in advance. I couldn't follow, it was too difficult sometimes. I mean, I had to first, especially in the beginning when I was new to Tibetan, okay, well, we studied this, I had already studied Tibetan for quite a few years, but in the very beginning, without first going through the entire text, it felt like a waste of time to go to class. Yeah, so I had to always prepared. It made a huge difference. If I was well prepared, it was so joyful to go to class. If I was ill prepared, and I had to go through the recording again. Yeah. Now, for you, it's so much easier in English. I mean, it really is not as difficult as Tibetan, especially if you're not native English speakers, then probably your language is close enough to English, or you've learned enough English. But please read in advance if you want, if you can. Yeah. All right. But hopefully we've covered a few things today. Let's just summarize it again, because it's a little bit all over the place. I started by saying mental factors, an important topic. I went through mind and mental factors, just clarifying, hopefully, that it seems as if a mind and its mental factors are like separate, totally separate. That's what the language seems to suggest, but that's not what it means. It's just from the point of view of different functions. From the point of view of the basic function of a mind, of apprehending its object, we say main mind. And from the point of view of secondary, but still essential other functions, we talk about the different mental factors. So each function is usually given a particular name of a mental factor. Well, the secondary function is given the name of a particular mental factor. So we covered that. Then after that, I talked about Maud's question about Buddhahood, and is this really the best way to help others? I gave a rough explanation of that, why we can establish that Buddhahood is possible, and then how the mind is now the best type of mind you can have to lead others to the same state. So hopefully that was a little bit more convincing. If not, then Maud, please come again. And then we went back to the text, the argument from last time, like bodhicitta or bodhisattva being preceded by the awakening mind, the mind realizing emptiness, and great, no debate about that. But the awakening mind here does not literally refer to actual bodhicitta, but contrived bodhicitta, the mind that you have to develop before you have that spontaneous, strong aspiration to become fully enlightened. That is generated in dependence on meditation. And as to the mind realizing emptiness, well, this is recommended for those of greater mental capacity to first come to understand that enlightenment exists, based on different steps of understanding. First of all, the misconception is the main perpetrator, the main cause of all our problems, understanding that it's a wrong consciousness, and therefore understanding that its object, inherent existence, doesn't exist. And based on that understanding, it can be removed, and therefore suffering and everything else can be removed, making liberation and enlightenment possible. All right. Okay, this is how far we got. We still have time for a few questions. One thing I don't want to forget to mention, I made a mistake before. I gave you wrong information. about hearers and solitary realizers. You remember we spoke about these three types of practitioners, including bodhisattvas, hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. And can they switch? Can they swap? In other words, can a bodhisattva enter a hearer path or a solitary realizer path? The answer is yes. And this part I was not mistaken about. On the very first level of a bodhisattva, which is called the small path of accumulation, you can lose bodhicitta. And if your renunciation isn't gone, you may now aim for self-liberation, and depending on your, I don't know, your mental capacity, etc., you either become a hearer or solitary realizer. Okay, no problem there. But what about a hearer entering a bodhisattva path, or a solitary realizer entering a bodhisattva path? For how long is that possible? Like, they also proceed through a path of accumulation, a path of preparation, a path of seeing, when they realize emptiness directly for the first time, path of meditation, and then becoming liberated, path of no more learning. Now, in that case, when can they enter a bodhisattva path? I said similar to the bodhisattva, the very first level only, and that was wrong. I kind of felt there was something not okay, so I looked up, I went back to our texts, especially the first chapter of the Abhisamaya Alamkara. There is an interesting topic. It's called the 20 Sanghas. Camilla studied it, yeah. It's actually talking about 20 types of bodhisattvas, but comparing them to 20 types of hearers. And these 20 types of hearers, you learn a lot about these hearers. And in that context, some commentaries talk about a hearer or a solitary realizer can enter a bodhisattva path on the path of accumulation or path of preparation. It's possible. But from the path of seeing onwards, no longer possible. And my guess is that's because the determination to become self-liberated is now so strong that they don't swerve from that. They don't leave that determined. I mean, they're so determined now that becoming a bodhisattva is just not part of their mental space, or I don't know how to put it, but they're just not interested. In other words, they're just not interested. From the path of on the path of accumulation and path of preparation, okay, they may be interested, they may be inspired to follow the bodhisattva path. However, they're no longer inspired from the path of seeing onwards. All right. Because it says very clearly that a hearer, a solitary realizer, Arya, does not enter a bodhisattva path. Does that make sense? So the information I gave you was wrong. Not that you're like terribly interested to know, I don't know. But since I gave you the wrong information, I thought to set it right. Yeah? So remember, from the path of seeing onwards, no way. A hearer, a solitary realizer, at least according to the explanation of that particular commentary. Anyway, no way do they enter the bodhisattva path. But on the path of accumulation or path of preparation, they can enter a bodhisattva path. Okay?
But when they're arhats,
yes. Yeah, then
the Buddhas wakes them up.
Yeah.
So that is not self-motivated in that way, or?
Yeah, once they become arhats, and some of them may, once they become arhats because of imprints from the past, actually be very soon inspired to enter the bodhisattva path. And then, that's of course for the benefit of all sentient beings, otherwise they wouldn't enter the bodhisattva path. And some remain in that meditative absorption, having attained liberation, just remaining in that blissful state of liberation for a long time, until that meditative mind kind of weakens a little bit and the bodhisattvas can inspire them to enter the bodhisattva path. But in that case, they became self-liberated. They reached self-liberation and then entered the bodhisattva path. But in the case of those hearers and solitary realizers who entered the bodhisattva path earlier than that, in that case they haven't become self-liberated yet. So on the path of accumulation or the path of preparation, they're inspired by Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and they decide, oh, self-liberation is out. Now I want to be, right? I want to become a Buddha. I want to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that initial motivation to become self-liberated gives way to bodhicitta. That's possible, but from the path of seeing onwards, the hearer path of seeing, or the solitary realizer path of hearing, I guess their determination to become self-liberated is so strong that unless they get there, they can't be convinced otherwise. So once they become self-liberated, they're open to new stuff, to put it that way, right? Okay, there's more to learn, they've reached their goal, they're possibly more open to, yeah. Does that explain that? Okay, great.
But
Yes.
So one question about this. So they become like liberated, self-liberated, right?
Yes.
So for entering the how you put it, the bodhisattva way, right?
Yes.
They must to lose a lot of capacities, right? They have to start like everything again, something like that.
Do they have to start everything again? That's actually a bit of a debate. Okay, so first of all, they have to still go through 5 paths. Okay, sorry, I need to first repeat the question. So, Venerable Lobsang? Yes, Venerable Lobsang asked, well, if they've reached self-liberation and now enter the Bodhisattva path, they still have to go through the different levels, like path of accumulation, path of preparation. And if you're familiar with these stages, you're probably aware that the path of preparation and the path of seeing, for instance, they are from the point of view of realizing emptiness, gaining a deeper understanding of emptiness. But then, so his question is, do they have to do all this again? They actually already did that. They have realized emptiness, even directly, right? So, do they actually move through the levels? And the answer is yes. However, not from the point of view of wisdom, but from the point of view of their bodhicitta, from the point of view of method. So, path of preparation, path of seeing, they have already realized emptiness directly. It's not from that point of view that they reach the Mahayana or the universal path of the Bodhisattva path of seeing. It's not from that point of view. It's from the point of view of their bodhicitta becoming stronger, their generosity, all their other method qualities that are part of the method aspect of the path. They become now equal to a bodhisattva who's reached the path of seeing but who has not previously gone through the fundamental vehicle, right? So from the wisdom point of view, they're already very advanced, having realized emptiness directly. They don't have to do the same training as someone who has become a bodhisattva from the outset. In other words, who's from the beginning, without having attained self-liberation, entered the bodhisattva path. That kind of person has to first generate calm abiding and special insight, realizing emptiness, then realize emptiness directly. And these levels are described through the path of preparation. You reach the unity of calm abiding and special insight, realizing emptiness conceptually. Then you move on to the direct realization on the path of seeing. So this is how their path is explained. But at the same time, they also develop bodhicitta more and more, become stronger and stronger. It's stronger on the path of seeing than it's on the path of preparation. All the other qualities, generosity becomes stronger. They all become stronger. Now, for the person who has already realized emptiness directly, who has reached the hero goal of arhatship, the wisdom part falls away, but they still need to develop their bodhicitta, their compassion, their generosity. That has to grow stronger and stronger so that it equals that of a bodhisattva who is a bodhisattva from the outset, who goes through these levels. So you go through the levels from the point of view of the method side, not the wisdom side. It's an important question. I had a hard time explaining it. Sorry for my stuttering around. There are quite a few questions here. Ooh. Okay, quite a few, okay. Oh, there's something about the trailblazers. I say that next time. Banu. Okay. It's just a discussion. Liberated being is simply someone who has generated the clear philosophical intent of the nature of things, and like someone who's liberated as well as removed all imprints. Okay. So the Buddha seems to have certain superpowers. Where do those come from? Oh, so Banu is kind of saying, according to what I explained earlier, a liberated being is someone who has generated the clear philosophical insight into the nature of things, so has realized emptiness, okay, and has removed realized emptiness directly, and through this mind realizing emptiness directly has removed everything that is in the way to becoming liberated, right? Becoming self-liberated. All right. But a Buddha is someone who has removed more than the afflictions, more than the misconception of reality and all the other afflictions, has removed all the imprints of non-clarity. So how is it that the Buddha seems to have certain superpowers? Superpowers. Unfortunately, he's lacking a few superpowers. Omnipotence to remove all the suffering, unfortunately. But the Buddha has now actualized the fullest potential of his or her own mind. I mean, we all have that potential to have the superpower of limitless love and compassion for all sentient beings without any effort. No effort whatsoever. There's nothing in the way, just totally being dedicated towards the benefit of all sentient beings. That kind of love and compassion. That's a superpower, yes. And the second is the omniscience, knowing exactly what the other person needs to practice to attain enlightenment in the fastest way. Okay, so if I knew now, if I were Buddha now, and I could tell Kumbin, do this, 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 this. If she were to do it, follow that advice, she'd become enlightened in the most possible way. Whether she does it or not, it's a different matter. But I, from my side, can give her the best I can. I can't take away her obstructions of the mind. Not omnipotent. Buddha is not. But I know exactly what she needs, and I have the love and compassion to give her exactly these, to give her my time. You know, she has the karma, of course, I know her karma. She has the karma to receive these teachings, to understand them, and I give her the teachings. So that's a superpower we all basically have, except that something is obstructing our mind from that superpower to come through. So it's not about gaining a new superpower, it's about removing what's in the way for that superpower to come into action. Right? So sometimes the Buddha's mind is described like a pure crystal, which is full of dirt. So the dirt are our afflictions, the imprints of our afflictions. Now once they're removed, that superpower comes through. And the fact that we have that potential is expressed by the word Buddha nature. We have Buddha nature because we have everything here to be a Buddha. That superpower is lying dormant. You can call it a superpower, I like that word. Okay, great. Yeah, so I think that's all we have time for. Sorry, that was a long class. Okay, 2 hours. You're still there, you're still awake. Okay, that's good. All right, so let's not forget to dedicate whatever virtue we've accumulated, first of all towards ourselves, attaining the superpowers of a Buddha, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of each and every sentient being. And in the meantime, of course, may all the positive potential we've accumulated also become a cause for our great masters, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the other living masters. May help them to have a long life, be healthy, and continue to guide and inspire us. And lastly, may whatever virtue we've accumulated also help those around us to experience less loneliness, less fear, less depression, and so forth, and find more inner peace. With that in mind, let's recite the dedication prayers. In this snow-encircled land, you are the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara Denzin Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. The brave Manjushri and also Samantabhadra realize things as they are. Hence, in order to be able to follow their example, I dedicate these merits in the best way. With the dedication praised as supreme by the victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate all these roots of virtue so that I might engage in the noble bodhisattva deeds. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay, thank you very much. And please read in advance.